In the opulent Casa de las Flores, Seville's jasmine-scented courtyards hide a deadly secret. When wealthy widow Doña Isabella Vargas is found stabbed with her own jeweled dagger, Hercule Poirot's holiday turns into a hunt for a cunning killer. A torn silk shawl, a lipstick-stained cigarette, a hidden dagger. Each clue points to a web of betrayal among family, friends, and servants. Can Poirot's little gray cells unravel the truth before the velvet curtains conceal it forever? Chapter 1. The Scent of Orange Blossoms. The late afternoon sun bathed Seville in a golden haze, its rays filtering through the intricate arches of the Casa de las Flores, a palatial mansion tucked within the labyrinthine alleys of the Barrio Santa Cruz. The air was heavy with the fragrance of orange blossoms, their sweetness mingling with the faint musk of jasmine that draped the velvet-curtained courtyards. Hercule Poirot, his black patent leather shoes gleaming, strolled through this oasis of elegance, his cane tapping a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant tolling of cathedral bells. He was, for once, on holiday, persuaded by his old friend Capitan Arturo Mendoza, a retired Spanish police officer with a penchant for fine sherry and finer stories. Mendoza had promised Poirot the splendors of Seville's Semana Santa, a spectacle of solemn processions and vibrant tradition. Yet, as Poirot adjusted his pristine Homburg hat, his keen gray eyes betrayed a mind never entirely at rest. "Mon ami," Poirot had said to Mendoza that morning over café con leche, "Seville, she is magnifique, but the little gray cells, they do not take holidays." Mendoza had laughed, his weathered face crinkling, and assured Poirot that nothing in Seville could trouble his genius. How wrong he was. The evening had begun with a gathering at the Casa de las Flores, hosted by its formidable mistress, Doña Isabella Vargas, a widow of 60 whose wealth and imperious demeanor commanded both admiration and resentment. The mansion, with its azulejo-tiled walls and Moorish fountains, was a testament to her fortune, amassed through her late husband's shipping empire. Guests milled about the central courtyard, their voices a soft hum beneath the strumming of a guitarist hired for the occasion. Poirot, ever observant, noted the undercurrents of tension, a sharp glance here, a forced smile there. The Semana Santa festivities were days away, yet the air held a chill that no Andalusian sun could dispel. At precisely 7:32 p.m., a scream tore through the courtyard, high and jagged, like glass shattering on stone. Poirot, standing near a bubbling fountain, froze, his mustache quivering as his senses sharpened. The music ceased, the guitarist's fingers stilled. Guests turned, their faces etched with confusion, as Mendoza pushed through the crowd, Poirot at his heels. They reached the heart of the courtyard, where a velvet drape hung like a stage curtain, framing a grim tableau. Doña Isabella Vargas lay sprawled on the cobblestones, her emerald silk dress splayed like a fallen banner. A jeweled dagger, its hilt encrusted with sapphires, protruded from her chest, and a crimson stain bloomed across her shawl. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the star-flecked sky. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, followed by a woman's stifled sob. Poirot knelt briefly, his gloved hand hovering over the body, careful not to disturb Cécine. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "a crime most theatrical." Mendoza, his face ashen, checked for a pulse, though the outcome was clear. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice thick. The crowd pressed closer, a mix of family, friends, and servants, their expressions a gallery of shock, fear, and, Poirot noted, calculation. He rose, his small frame commanding despite its diminutive size, and surveyed the faces. There was Don Carlos Vargas, Isabella's son, a man of 30 with the handsome features and hollow eyes of a gambler. His cravat was askew, his hands fidgeting as he muttered to no one in particular. Beside him stood Senora Elena Morales, Isabella's younger sister, her beauty sharpened by a brittle elegance, her black lace fan snapping shut as she met Poirot's gaze. Dr. Rafael Torres, the family physician, hovered at the edge, his spectacles glinting as he wiped sweat from his brow despite the cool evening. Miss Clara Beaumont, the English governess to Isabella's ward, clutched a handkerchief, her pale cheeks flushed. Javier, the butler, stood rigid, his dark eyes darting between the body and the guests, as if guarding a secret. The clatter of boots announced the arrival of Inspector Navarro, a burly man with a mustache rivaling Poirot's in breadth, if not in finesse. His officers cordoned off the courtyard, barking orders in rapid Spanish. Navarro knelt beside the body, his face grim. "A robbery, perhaps," he said, noting the absence of Isabella's emerald necklace. "These old houses attract thieves." Poirot's lips pursed. "Non, Inspector," he said softly, his Belgian accent crisp. "A thief does not leave a dagger so fine, nor strike in a courtyard full of eyes. This is personal, n'est-ce pas?" Navarro's eyes narrowed, his pride bristling at the foreigner's intrusion. "This is my jurisdiction, senor. You are a guest here." Mendoza intervened, his voice steady. "Inspector, this is Hercule Poirot, the detective. His mind is sharper than any blade. Let him assist." Navarro grunted, unconvinced, but allowed Poirot to observe, provided he kept his theories to himself. Poirot inclined his head, a gesture of acquiescence that masked his determination. He circled the body, his eyes cataloging details. The angle of the dagger, suggesting a right-handed assailant. The undisturbed cobblestones, indicating no prolonged struggle. The faint scent of tobacco mingling with orange blossoms, curious in a courtyard where no one smoked. The velvet drapes, heavy and ornate, swayed gently, their shadows concealing the arches that led to other parts of the mansion. Any of the guests could have slipped away, struck, and returned unseen. Poirot turned to Mendoza. "Mon ami, we have a puzzle. The Casa de las Flores, she hides a serpent among her blooms. But fear not, the little gray cells, they will find it." As the police began their interviews, Poirot retreated to a stone bench, his mind already weaving a tapestry of motives. Isabella's wealth, her family's resentments, her iron will, each was a thread in a pattern yet to emerge. The guitarist resumed playing, a mournful flamenco that seemed to lament the widow's fate. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on his cane. Seville's beauty had been marred, but Hercule Poirot would restore its order. Chapter 2. The Shadows of Motive. The morning sun filtered through the Casa de las Flores' stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the library's polished mahogany floors. Hercule Poirot sat at a carved oak table, his posture impeccable, a cup of café con leche steaming before him. His small, fastidious hands adjusted the alignment of his saucer, ensuring symmetry, while his gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, surveyed the room. The library, with its towering shelves of leather-bound volumes and faint scent of old paper, was a sanctuary of order, a quality Poirot cherished. Yet the events of the previous evening, the brutal murder of Doña Isabella Vargas in the velvet-draped courtyard, had shattered that order. His holiday in Seville, meant for leisurely strolls and Semana Santa's solemn pageantry, had become a battlefield for his little gray cells. Capitan Arturo Mendoza joined him, his footsteps heavy on the tiles. His face, usually alight with Andalusian warmth, was drawn, the weight of the crime pressing upon him. "Hercule," he said, settling into a chair. "Inspector Navarro is a good man, but he is stubborn. He insists this is a robbery, some thief after Isabella's jewels. I fear he misses the truth." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, the good inspector sees only the surface, like a man who admires a painting but ignores its brushstrokes. A thief does not wield a jeweled dagger from the victim's own collection, nor leave it behind as a calling card. None. This is a crime of the heart, of passion or vengeance. We must look to those who knew her best." Mendoza nodded, producing a slim notebook. "Navarro's men have established the time of death, between 7 and 7:30 last evening, when the courtyard was briefly empty. The guests were mingling, some in the salon, others in the dining hall. The dagger, an antique from Isabella's display case, had no fingerprints. The emerald necklace she wore is missing, which fuels Navarro's theory." Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the table. "The necklace, it is a distraction, perhaps. The dagger, it speaks, louder. Its choice was deliberate, a message. We must learn who had access to it, and who had reason to hate Doña Isabella." He sipped his coffee, savoring its bitterness. "Tell me, Arturo, of the household. Who stood to gain from her death?" Mendoza leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Isabella was a woman of iron will. Her son, Don Carlos Vargas, is a gambler, drowning in debts. She refused to bail him out, and their quarrels were the talk of Seville. Her sister, Señora Elena Morales, lived in her shadow, always second to Isabella's wealth and charm. There's bitterness there, though Elena hides it behind elegance. Dr. Rafael Torres, the physician, depended on Isabella's patronage. He treated her ward, Sophia, and some say he had ambitions beyond medicine. Miss Clara Beaumont, the English governess, is quiet, but her eyes are watchful. And Javier, the butler, has served the family for decades, but even loyalty can mask secrets." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A cast most intriguing, each with a shadow of motive. Let us begin with the interviews. The truth, it hides in the words they choose, and those they do not." The first to face Poirot was Don Carlos Vargas, summoned to the library under Navarro's grudging permission. Carlos slouched in a chair, his silk waistcoat rumpled, his dark hair falling into eyes that flickered with unease. At 30, he had the charm of youth, but the weariness of a man who had wagered too much and won too little. Poirot noted the tremor in his hands, the faint scent of brandy on his breath. "Monsieur Vargas," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. "You were with your mother last evening, oui? Tell me of your conversation." Carlos shifted, his fingers tugging at his cuff. "It was nothing unusual. Mother was difficult. She lectured me about my debts, said I'd get nothing more from her. We argued in the salon, then I went to the billiard room with Javier. I didn't see her again until—" His voice faltered, but his eyes remained dry. "And this argument, it was heated?" Poirot pressed, his gaze unyielding. Carlos flushed. "Yes, but I didn't kill her. I was nowhere near the courtyard. Ask Javier. He'll tell you." Poirot inclined his head, dismissing him with a wave. "Merci, monsieur. We shall speak again." As Carlos left, Poirot murmured to Mendoza, He is nervous, but is it guilt or fear? The alibi, it depends on the butler. We shall see. Next came Senora Elena Morales, gliding into the room like a queen in mourning. Her black silk dress rustled softly, and her fan, an exquisite piece of ivory and lace, moved with practiced grace. Yet Poirot noticed the tightness of her jaw, the way her dark eyes avoided his. "Senora," he said, offering a chair, "your sister's death, it is a great loss. You were close, I presume?" Elena's lips curved, a smile more bitter than sweet. "Close? Isabella was my elder by 10 years. She had everything. Wealth, beauty, power. I was the spare, always in her shadow. But I loved her, Monsieur Poirot, in my way." Her fan snapped shut, a sharp sound in the quiet room. "And last evening, where were you at the time of the tragedy?" "In the dining hall, arranging flowers for the table. I saw nothing, heard nothing, until the scream." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, clutching the fan too tightly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Your sister, she had enemies?" Elena hesitated, then said, "Isabella was not a woman to be crossed. She made enemies as easily as she made friends. But murder? That is another matter." As she left, Poirot turned to Mendoza. "She speaks with care, mon ami, but her hands, they tell a different story. There is resentment, perhaps more." Dr. Rafael Torres entered next, his spectacles glinting under the chandelier's light. His suit was impeccable, but his nervous tic, a slight twitch of his left eye, betrayed unease. Poirot noted the sheen of perspiration on his brow, despite the library's cool air. "Doctor," Poirot began, "you were tending to Mademoiselle Sophia, the ward, at the time of the murder, oui?" Torres nodded vigorously. "Yes, Sophia had a headache. I was with her in the nursery from 6:30 until after the scream. Miss Beaumont can confirm it." "And Doña Isabella, she was in good health?" Torres hesitated. "She was robust but troubled. She spoke of concerns, family matters, but never confided details." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And your relationship with the family? It is purely professional?" A flush crept up Torres's neck. "Of course, I owe Isabella, Doña Vargas, much. She was my patron." His words were firm, but his eyes darted to the door. Miss Clara Beaumont followed, her English reserve a stark contrast to the household's fiery passions. Her gray dress was modest, her blonde hair neatly pinned, but her blue eyes held a flicker of defiance. Poirot asked about her movements, and she answered softly, "I was with Dr. Torres in the nursery, helping Sophia. We heard the scream and rushed to the courtyard." "You are fond of Sophia?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle. "She's a dear girl," Clara said, her voice catching. "Isabella was kind to her, but strict. I only want Sophia's happiness." Finally, Javier, the butler, stood before Poirot, his posture rigid as a soldier's. His dark eyes were unreadable, his hands steady. "I was in the pantry, polishing silver," he said. "I heard nothing until the scream." "And Don Carlos, he was with you?" Poirot asked. "Yes, in the billiard room, until just before 7. He left, and I went to the pantry." Poirot dismissed him, then leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Each alibi, it is fragile, supported only by another's word. The courtyard, with its many arches, offers opportunity. But the motive, it lies in the shadows of their hearts." Mendoza frowned. "You suspect them all?" Poirot smiled faintly. "For now, mon ami, I suspect everyone. The little gray cells, they are only beginning to work." Chapter 3. The Whisper of Silk. The afternoon sun hung low over Seville, its rays slanting through the Casa de las Flores courtyards, where the velvet drapes stirred lazily in the warm breeze. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the central courtyard, the scene of Doña Isabella Vargas's murder, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, his cane resting lightly in his gloved hand. The cobblestones gleamed, washed clean of blood by the diligent servants, but the air still carried a faint echo of tragedy, as if the jasmine vines themselves mourned their mistress. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, traced the arches and alcoves, reconstructing the fatal moment. The little gray cells, he knew, thrived on details. The smallest thread could unravel the tightest knot. He bent to examine a rose bush near where Isabella had fallen, its thorns glinting like tiny daggers. Caught among the leaves was a scrap of silk, emerald green, its edges frayed as if torn in haste. Poirot extracted it with a pair of tweezers, holding it to the light. It matched the shade of Isabella's shawl, but the tear suggested a struggle, brief and violent. "Curieux," he murmured, slipping the scrap into an envelope. Nearby, half hidden beneath a stone bench, lay a cigarette stub, its tip stained with a faint coral hue. Lipstick. Poirot's mustache twitched. None of the women, Senora Elena, Miss Beaumont, or young Sophia, had admitted to smoking, yet here was evidence of a secret vice. He pocketed the stub, his mind already weaving possibilities. Capitan Arturo Mendoza joined him, his face etched with frustration. "Navarro is convinced the missing necklace is the key," he said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "He's scouring Seville for jewel thieves, but I fear he chases shadows." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "The necklace, it is a bauble to distract us, mon ami. The silk, the cigarette, these are the whispers of truth. Someone was here, perhaps watching, perhaps acting. We must listen closely." Poirot requested a private audience with Sophia, Isabella's 16-year-old ward, in the mansion's conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and orchids. The girl sat on a wicker chair, her dark hair braided tightly, her hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes, large and luminous, held a fragility that touched even Poirot's disciplined heart. "Mademoiselle Sophia," he began, his voice gentle, "you loved your aunt, oui? Tell me of her, and of the days before her death." Sophia's gaze dropped to her hands. "Tia Isabella was strict but kind. She took me in after my parents died. Lately, though, she was different, angry. She said someone was stealing from her, not jewels, but something personal. She wouldn't tell me more." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes intent. "And this anger, it was directed at someone in the household?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "She argued with Tio Carlos often about money, and with Dr. Torres. She said he'd disappointed her. I overheard her in her study, talking to herself about a betrayal." Poirot's fingers tapped his cane. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Sophia left, her footsteps soft on the tiled floor, Poirot turned to Mendoza. "The child sees more than she knows. A betrayal, a theft. This is the heart of the matter." That evening, the household gathered for dinner in the grand dining hall, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting Seville's history. The chandeliers cast a warm glow, but the atmosphere was brittle, like glass awaiting a hammer's blow. Poirot, seated beside Mendoza, observed the guests with the precision of a watchmaker. Don Carlos drank deeply from his wine glass, his laughter too loud, his eyes darting to the empty chair where Isabella once presided. Senora Elena, her black dress a study in elegance, toyed with her food, her fan idle, but her gaze sharp. Dr. Torres spoke little, his spectacles reflecting the candlelight, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Beaumont, pale and composed, excused herself early, pleading a headache. Javier, serving with silent efficiency, moved like a shadow, his face betraying nothing. Halfway through the meal, Carlos slammed his glass down, his voice slurring. "Elena, you always wanted Mother's place. Did you finally take it?" The room froze, forks suspended. Elena's eyes flashed, her fan snapping open. "You dare accuse me, you wastrel? Your debts drove her to despair." Torres attempted to intervene, his voice unsteady. "Please, this is no time for accusations." But his words faltered as he knocked over his wine, the red liquid pooling like blood on the linen. Poirot's lips curved faintly. The tension it revealed much. Later, in the privacy of the library, Poirot shared his thoughts with Mendoza. The silk, it suggests a struggle, perhaps Isabella resisting her attacker. The cigarette, it points to a woman, or someone clever enough to plant such a clue. And Sophia's words, they hint at a secret Isabella uncovered, one that threatened the killer. Mendoza frowned. But who? Carlos's debts, Elena's envy, Torres's ambition, each could be motive. And Clara, so quiet, yet her eyes are not those of an innocent. Poirot nodded. And Javier, the loyal servant, he sees all but speaks little. We must probe deeper, mon ami. Tomorrow I shall examine Isabella's study, her papers, they may hold the key. As they parted, Poirot lingered by a window, gazing at the courtyard below. The velvet drapes swayed, their shadows dancing like specters. "The Casa de las Flores," he mused. "She is beautiful, but her secrets are deadly. The little gray cells, they will find the truth." Chapter 4. The Will and the Ward. The fourth day dawned over Seville with a sky of bruised clouds, casting a somber pall over the Casa de las Flores. Hercule Poirot, ever immaculate in his tailored suit and polished shoes, stood in the mansion's study, a room of dark walnut panels and heavy brocade curtains. The air held the faint tang of ink and lavender, remnants of Doña Isabella Vargas's presence. Her desk, a massive affair carved with arabesques, bore a locked drawer that had piqued Poirot's curiosity. His little gray cells hummed with anticipation, for he sensed that the secrets of this room would illuminate the shadows of motive cast by the murder. Capitan Arturo Mendoza arrived, bearing news from Inspector Navarro. "The will was found this morning, Hercule," he said, his voice low. "Isabella left her estate to Sofia, her ward, with a modest annuity for Senora Elena. Don Carlos gets nothing. His debts, it seems, were his undoing. There's also a codicil added last week, mentioning a betrayal Isabella intended to confront." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache quivering. "A betrayal, mon ami, is a spark that ignites murder. The will, it shifts the balance of power. We must see these papers, and quickly." Navarro grudgingly had granted Poirot access to the study, though he hovered nearby, his skepticism palpable. Poirot examined the desk, his gloved fingers tracing its edges until he found a hidden catch. The locked drawer yielded, revealing a bundle of letters and a leather-bound ledger. The letters, penned in Isabella's elegant hand, hinted at a scandal involving Dr. Rafael Torres. One note read, "Raphael's secret must not destroy Sophia. I will act." Poirot's brow furrowed. A secret tied to the ward, perhaps, he murmured. The ledger was more revealing. It detailed payments, small but regular, to an unnamed recipient, marked only with the initial X. Poirot showed it to Mendoza. These sums, they suggest blackmail or a hidden debt. Isabella suspected theft, Sophia told us. This may be the key. Poirot summoned Dr. Torres to the study, where the physician stood, his spectacles fogging slightly in the warm room. His tic was more pronounced, a nervous twitch that betrayed his composure. "Doctor," Poirot said, his voice smooth as silk, "you were close to Doña Isabella, oui? She trusted you with her health, perhaps her confidences?" Torres adjusted his glasses, his fingers unsteady. "She was my patient, nothing more. I treated her for fatigue, nothing serious." His voice was clipped, but his eyes avoided Poirot's. "And this?" Poirot held up the letter, its words veiled but damning. "She speaks of your secret, one that concerns Sophia." What did she mean? Torres paled, his tic worsening. "It's an old matter. Years ago, Isabella and we were briefly involved. It ended amicably, but she feared Sophia might learn and think less of her. She threatened to expose it, to ruin my reputation, but I swear I did not harm her." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And these payments, marked X, were they to you, perhaps, to ensure your silence?" Torres recoiled. "No, I know nothing of that." His voice cracked, and he excused himself, claiming a patient needed him. Poirot watched him go, his mind cataloging the physician's fear. Next, Poirot sought Javier, the butler, in the mansion's pantry, where silver gleamed under lamplight. Javier polished a candelabra with mechanical precision, his face a mask of stoicism. "Monsieur Javier," Poirot began, "you served Doña Isabella faithfully. Did she confide in you about her suspicions of theft?" Javier's hands paused, then resumed their work. "She mentioned concerns, yes. Someone was taking money, small amounts from her accounts. She was investigating, but kept her findings private. I urged her to tell the police, but she refused." "And you? You noticed nothing unusual? No visitors? No letters?" Javier's eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded. "I see much, senor, but I speak little. My place is to serve, not to judge." He returned to his task, the scrape of cloth on silver filling the silence. Poirot dismissed him, turning to Mendoza. "The butler, he is loyal, but loyalty can hide truth. These payments, they suggest someone close, someone trusted. We must find this X." That afternoon, Poirot returned to the study, poring over Isabella's correspondence. A letter, half-finished, caught his eye. It was addressed to her lawyer, instructing him to revise the will further, to protect Sophia from those who would exploit her. The letter was dated the day before her death, its ink smudged as if written in haste. Poirot's fingers tapped his cane. "She knew her time was short," he said to Mendoza. "This betrayal, it was no mere scandal. It was a threat to her legacy." He requested Sophia's presence once more, meeting her in the conservatory, where the orchids seemed to droop in sympathy. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "your aunt, she feared for you. Did she speak of anyone who might wish to control you, perhaps through marriage or influence?" Sophia's eyes widened, her fingers twisting a ribbon. "She warned me about being too trusting. She said Dr. Torres was too attentive, that his kindness wasn't always pure, but he's always been good to me." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And others? Miss Beaumont, perhaps, or your Tio Carlos?" Sophia shook her head. "Clara is kind, but quiet. Tio Carlos. He's always asking for money, but he loves me, I think." Her voice trembled, and Poirot dismissed her with a reassuring smile. As evening fell, Poirot paced the courtyard, the velvet drapes casting long shadows. Mendoza joined him, his brow furrowed. "Hercule, this X, these payments, could they point to the killer?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Perhaps, mon ami, but the payments are a thread, not the tapestry. The will, the letter, the betrayal. They weave a pattern. Isabella uncovered something that threatened the killer's plans, something tied to Sophia. We must tread carefully, for the serpent is still among us." He paused, his gaze lingering on the rose bush where the silk scrap had been found. "Tomorrow we shall test the waters, a small rumor, perhaps, to stir the guilty. The little gray cells, they sense the truth is near." Chapter 5. A Dance of Deceptions. The 5th day in Seville brought a restless heat, the air thick with the promise of rain, as if the heavens themselves sensed the gathering storm within the Casa de las Flores. Hercule Poirot, his suit pristine despite the humidity, stood in the mansion's salon, its high ceilings adorned with frescoes of mythical beasts. The room buzzed with the low hum of suspicion, the guests moving like chess pieces in a game only Poirot could see. His little gray cells, ever alert, had devised a stratagem to unsettle the guilty, a subtle trap to coax the truth from the shadows. The murder of Doña Isabella Vargas, stabbed with her own jeweled dagger, was a puzzle nearing its solution, but the final piece eluded him. Poirot had enlisted Capitan Arturo Mendoza to spread a rumor among the household. A witness, unnamed, claimed to have seen someone fleeing the courtyard at the time of the murder. The tale was a fiction, but Poirot knew that guilt, like a startled bird, would betray itself in flight. He arranged to observe the suspects at tea, a ritual hosted in the mansion's rose garden, where trellises draped with crimson blooms framed a long table set with porcelain and silver. The setting, so delicate, belied the tension that crackled like static. As the guests gathered, Poirot took his place beside Mendoza, his eyes scanning each face. Don Carlos Vargas, his cravat loosened, poured tea with a trembling hand, his laughter forced as he jested about the weather. Señora Elena Morales, her black silk gown shimmering, sipped her tea with calculated poise, though her fan moved faster than usual. Dr. Rafael Torres, his spectacles slipping, spoke in clipped tones about medical journals, his fingers tapping nervously on the tablecloth. Miss Clara Beaumont, pale as the porcelain, sat rigidly, her eyes fixed on her cup. Javier, the butler, served with his usual precision, but Poirot noted a slight hesitation in his movements, as if he, too, listened for whispers of the rumor. The conversation turned to the investigation, prompted by Mendoza's casual mention of the witness. Carlos choked on his tea, coughing violently. "A witness? Who?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Elena's fan paused, her lips parting slightly before she resumed her composed smile. Torres excused himself to fetch a handkerchief, his chair scraping loudly. Clara's cup clattered against its saucer, her hands shaking as she murmured an apology. Javier alone remained impassive, though his eyes lingered on Clara. Poirot leaned toward Mendoza, whispering, "The guilty one, they are stirred, mon ami. Observe Mademoiselle Beaumont. Her reaction, it is most telling." After tea, Poirot requested a private word with Clara in the conservatory, where the air was heavy with the scent of orchids. She stood by a fern, her gray dress blending with the shadows, her face pale but defiant. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle yet probing. "You were in the courtyard that evening, oui? The cigarette stub, with its coral lipstick. It is yours, is it not?" Clara's eyes widened, her fingers clutching her sleeve. I don't smoke, Monsieur Poirot," she stammered, but the flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze steady. "The truth, mademoiselle. It is better to speak now than to be found out later." Tears welled in her eyes, and she sank onto a wicker chair. "Very well," she whispered. "I was there, but not to kill her. Raphael, Dr. Torres, and I, we met in the courtyard, a secret meeting. We heard Isabella coming and hid behind the drapes. We saw nothing, I swear." Her voice broke, her hands twisting her handkerchief. "And the cigarette?" Poirot pressed. "I smoke to calm my nerves," she admitted. "It's a habit I hide, but we left before anything happened." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, mademoiselle, you did not come forward. Why?" Clara's gaze dropped. "I was afraid. Raphael said it would ruin us if anyone knew." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "Please, you must believe me." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, his mind racing. Her story was plausible, but too convenient. A rendezvous could mask darker intentions. He resolved to press Torres later, but first another clue demanded attention: the jeweled dagger's twin. Poirot met Mendoza in the library, where they examined Isabella's collection of antiques displayed in a glass case. The daggers, a matched pair from Granada, were renowned for their sapphire-encrusted hilts. One had killed Isabella, the other was missing. "The second dagger, mon ami," Poirot said. "It is a shadow of the crime. If we find it, we find the killer's hand." He questioned Javier, who confirmed the daggers were kept under lock and key, accessible only to Isabella and himself. "I checked the case that morning," Javier said, his voice steady. "Both were there. I don't know when the second was taken." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, monsieur, you had no reason to touch them?" Javier's jaw tightened. "I served Doña Isabella for 20 years. I would never betray her." Yet Poirot sensed a flicker of unease, a crack in the butler's armor. He instructed Mendoza to organize a discreet search of the mansion, focusing on the suspect's rooms. "The dagger, it is close," he said, "and with it, the truth." That evening, Poirot lingered in the courtyard, the velvet drapes casting long shadows under the lanterns. Mendoza joined him, his face grim. "The search found nothing, Hercule, but Navarro grows impatient. He insists the necklace is the motive and threatens to arrest Carlos for his debts." Poirot shook his head. "The necklace is a mirage, mon ami. The dagger, the cigarette, the betrayal, they point to a deeper truth. Clara's confession, it is a step, but not the destination. We must watch Dr. Torres closely. His secret, it binds him to Clara, and perhaps to the crime." As they parted, Poirot's gaze lingered on the rosebush, its thorns glinting in the lamplight. "The dance of deceptions, it grows intricate," he murmured, "but Hercule Poirot, he does not stumble." Chapter 6. The Second Blade. The 6th day in Seville dawned with a restless energy, the clouds parting to reveal a sky of piercing blue, as if the heavens mocked the turmoil within the Casa de las Flores. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle, stood in the mansion's central courtyard, where the velvet drapes hung heavy with the weight of secrets. The murder of Doña Isabella Vargas, stabbed with her own jeweled dagger, had woven a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot's little gray cells were now poised to unravel it. The scent of jasmine lingered, but it could not mask the faint, metallic tang of suspicion that permeated the air. The morning brought a breakthrough. A gardener tending the courtyard's fountains discovered a cloth bundle wedged in the base of a stone basin. Inside was the second jeweled dagger, its sapphire-encrusted hilt gleaming, wrapped in a handkerchief embroidered with the letter E. Poirot, summoned by Capitan Arturo Mendoza, examined the find under the watchful eye of Inspector Navarro, whose scowl deepened at the detective's presence. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, holding the dagger aloft with gloved hands. "The twin of the murder weapon, hidden so close to the crime. This is no coincidence, mes amis." The handkerchief, delicate linen with fine stitching, pointed to Senora Elena Morales, but Poirot's eyes gleamed with caution. "A clue so obvious, it begs suspicion. Is it a truth or a frame?" Navarro snorted. "It's proof enough for me. Elena's motive, her envy, her paltry annuity, is clear." He ordered his men to summon her, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Inspector," he said, his voice smooth. "The guilty, they do not leave such gifts so carelessly. We must question, not accuse." In the mansion's salon, Elena faced Poirot, her black silk gown as regal as ever, but her eyes blazed with indignation. The handkerchief, presented by Mendoza, lay on the table like an accusation. "This is mine," she admitted, her voice sharp as a blade. "But it was stolen from my room days ago. Someone is framing me, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the dining hall when Isabella died. Ask the servants." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, madame, the dagger was hidden near the scene. If not you, who would? Use your handkerchief?" Elena's fan snapped open, her hands trembling. "Carlos, perhaps, to shift blame. Or that governess, Clara. She's slyer than she seems." Her words were venomous, but her fear was palpable. Poirot dismissed her, noting the crack in her composure. Poirot turned his attention to the courtyard's layout, mapping it in his mind. The fountain, tucked in an alcove, was obscured by drapes, a perfect hiding place. The killer, he reasoned, had acted swiftly, concealing the second dagger to avoid suspicion. But why keep it so near? "The answer, mon ami," he told Mendoza, "lies in haste or arrogance. The killer believed it safe." He requested a meeting with Dr. Rafael Torres, whose nervous tic had grown more pronounced. In the library, Torres stood by a window, his spectacles catching the light. "Doctor," Poirot began, "Miss Beaumont claims you met in the courtyard that night. A rendezvous, oui? Yet you saw nothing of the murder?" Torres's hands clenched. "It's as Clara said. We met briefly, then parted before Isabella appeared. I swear, I saw nothing." His voice rose, a note of desperation creeping in. "And this dagger," Poirot said, gesturing to a sketch of the find. "It was part of a pair you admired, perhaps?" Torres shook his head vehemently. "I never touched them. Isabella kept them locked away." But his tic betrayed him, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. That evening, an unexpected disturbance shook the mansion. A crash echoed from Isabella's study, and Poirot, dining with Mendoza, hastened to investigate. They found the room in disarray, a window forced open, papers scattered. Javier, the butler, stood in the doorway, his face pale. "I heard the noise and came running," he said. "Someone was here." Poirot's gaze swept the room. A drawer, previously locked, gaped open, its contents rifled. They sought something specific, he said, his voice low. A letter, perhaps, or proof of the X payments. He turned to Javier. You were quick to arrive, monsieur. Did you see the intruder? Javier's eyes flickered. No, senor. They were gone before I reached the door. His tone was steady, but Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow. Questioned further, Javier admitted to searching the study earlier that day at Isabella's behest. She asked me to find a letter, he said, his voice tight. One that named a thief in the household. I found nothing, and I told no one. Poirot's fingers tapped his cane. And yet, someone knew. The little gray cells, they suspect a connection. Later, in the courtyard, Poirot confided in Mendoza. The second dagger, the handkerchief, the break-in, they are threads in a cunning weave. Elena's fear suggests she is a target, not a culprit. Javier's story, it is too neat. And Torres, his panic grows. We are close, mon ami, but the killer is clever. Mendoza frowned. Could Javier be X? The payments, his access to the daggers. Poirot nodded. Possible, but the pattern is incomplete. Tomorrow we gather all. The truth, it will not hide behind velvet drapes. Chapter 7. The Velvet Curtain Falls. The seventh evening in Seville draped the Casa de las Flores in a mantle of twilight, the velvet curtains of the central courtyard glowing under the flicker of wrought-iron lanterns. Hercule Poirot, his suit as impeccable as ever, stood at the heart of the courtyard, where Doña Isabella Vargas had met her end. The air was thick with the scent of orange blossoms, but the sweetness could not mask the tension that coiled among the gathered guests. Poirot had summoned them all: Don Carlos Vargas, Señora Elena Morales, Dr. Rafael Torres, Miss Clara Beaumont, Javier the butler, and young Sophia, to unveil the truth behind Isabella's murder. His little gray cells had woven the threads of evidence into a tapestry of revelation, and now, in true Hercule Poirot fashion, he would draw back the curtain. Capitan Arturo Mendoza stood at his side, his face a mix of anticipation and weariness. Inspector Navarro, arms crossed, lingered near the fountain, his skepticism tempered by curiosity. The suspects sat on stone benches or stood in the shadows of the arches, their expressions ranging from defiance to dread. Poirot's gray eyes swept over them, his mustache twitching with quiet satisfaction. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. The murder of Doña Isabella Vargas was no act of chance, but a crime of calculation, woven from betrayal and ambition. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the killer. He paced slowly, his cane tapping the cobblestones. Let us begin with the scene. A courtyard, public yet private, where Isabella was stabbed with her own jeweled dagger between 7 and 7:30. The weapon, taken from a locked case, suggests intimacy. A killer who knew the house. The second dagger, found in the fountain, wrapped in Señora Elena's handkerchief, was meant to mislead. But the truth, it lies in smaller details. A scrap of silk torn from Isabella's shawl, a cigarette stub with coral lipstick, a ledger of payments to X, and a letter hinting at a betrayal. Carlos shifted, his hands fidgeting. Elena's fan moved slowly, her eyes narrowed. Torres adjusted his spectacles, his tic pronounced. Clara clutched her shawl, her face pale. Javier stood rigid, his gaze fixed on Poirot. Sophia, seated beside Mendoza, trembled slightly. The silk, Poirot continued, tells of a struggle, brief but fierce. The cigarette points to Miss Beaumont, who confessed to smoking in the courtyard during a rendezvous with Dr. Torres. But was it only a rendezvous? The ledger and letter reveal Isabella's discovery, a plot to control Sophia's inheritance. The will, leaving all to Sophia, was a threat to the guilty. He turned to Torres, whose face drained of color. "Doctor, you had a secret, an affair, with Isabella, long ended, but she threatened to expose it. Why? Because she learned of your greater ambition, to marry Sophia, to secure her fortune through influence." Torres stammered, "That's absurd. I cared for Sophia, yes, but as a guardian." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, monsieur. The payments to X were not blackmail, but a ruse. Your payments to Clara to ensure her cooperation. Miss Beaumont, you were no mere governess, but a partner in this scheme. You met Torres in the courtyard, but not for love, for planning. Isabella confronted you that night, having overheard your intentions. She threatened to change her will again, to protect Sophia." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "No, I didn't." Poirot's voice sharpened. "You smoked to calm your nerves, mademoiselle, leaving the cigarette stub. But it was Dr. Torres who acted. He followed Isabella, took the dagger, and struck when she was alone. The silk tore as she resisted. You, Clara, stood watch, ensuring no one approached. The second dagger, hidden with Elena's handkerchief, was your attempt to cast suspicion elsewhere." Torres leapt to his feet, his voice hoarse. "Lies. You have no proof." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The proof, it is in your fear, monsieur, and in the study's break-in, your attempt to destroy Isabella's letter to her lawyer, naming you as a threat. Javier caught you, but you fled, leaving chaos." Clara sobbed, collapsing into her seat. "It was an accident. Isabella was going to ruin everything, Sophia's marriage, our future. Raphael only meant to frighten her, but she fought and—" Her voice broke, and Torres's shoulders slumped, his resistance crumbling. "I didn't mean to kill her," he whispered. "She was going to tell Sophia, to ruin my name. It happened so fast." Navarro, stunned, signaled his men to arrest Torres and Clara. The courtyard fell silent, save for Sophia's soft weeping. Elena's fan stilled, her face a mask of relief. Carlos, for once, was speechless. Javier bowed his head, as if mourning more than Isabella's death. Poirot turned to Mendoza. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they see through the velvet curtain. The truth, it is always there, waiting for order and method.